let's just say the mood shift in
We were like,
D and I's week, we were like, wait. Why is no one talking about this? It must be hard having a child right now when porn is accessible. And I think about it all the time.
We are going to continue being overpopulated over the next 60 years. The population is going to increase. But then that's where we're going to start seeing the decline and the issues post 60 years of that overpopulation.
In this economy,
Yeah.
baby, no. Like, we can't be doing it.
Hi, I'm Dee Salmon.
Hi, I'm Pip Rasmussen.
This is The Hookup. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. We talk all things love, sex, dating and relationships. And we've been trying something new. So once a month, Pip and I have been doing more of like a deep dive, investigative, research-driven episode.
Yeah, so maybe you caught our one about femcells, or we did a massive one talking about AI and relationships. If you haven't already seen them, please go back and watch them. But today, we're going to talk about falling birth rates around the world. You've probably noticed headlines, or maybe not so much, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be talked about, which is something that we're going to get into.
Yeah.
But we've noticed just from ourselves, you know, getting a bit older and then having to think about like being women, like, oh, fuck, what do we want to do?
The biological clock.
And then lots of our friends are having these conversations. It just seems to be, back in the day, everyone just like assumed you got married, you had kids, that was what you did. But now there seems to be a lot more confusion and a lot more thought going into making that decision and whether or not it's something that you actually want to do.
And you also might have seen some research or headlines around the place talking about how birth rates around the world are declining pretty rapidly, and they are at like rock bottom. It's like the lowest that we've ever seen. So we're going to figure out why that is
Yeah.
and what you feel about it.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
So this isn't going to be an episode on why you should or should not have kids. There's going to be no judgment around that. We basically just want to explore why the birth rates are dropping so rapidly, but also why you might be having feelings of confusion around having kids as well.
Yeah. And at the end of the episode, we're going to explain why it might be potentially a bad thing, because quite a few of you DM'd us and you were like, is it actually bad that we have less kids happening in the world? And we'll get to that at the very end. But first, let's look at the research and see kind of what is going on around the globe. And we can give you a bit of a snapshot as to each country. So currently in Australia, our fertility rate now sits at 1.51 as of last year, which is the lowest it's been. And it's well below the 2.1 replacement rate needed to sustain population growth. Replacement rate obviously sounds like such a strange clinical word, but that's basically the amount of kids to each person or mother, I guess, that needs to maintain a population like in a healthy way. But we're really underneath that.
Yeah. Also, we're going to be saying a bunch of stats and a bunch of research. We don't have time to explain exactly where we got that research from, but we will have a bunch of links in our show notes. So if you want to do some deep diving into that research, go have a look there. But there was a bit of research that broke down the different birth rates around the world at the moment. So South Korea is actually has the lowest fertility rate at the moment at 0.75 per person or per family. China is 1.16. In the US, it's 1.62. In the UK, it's 1.44. Brazil, 1.6. And like Pip said, here in Australia, it's 1.51.
So we asked you as well about like what you feel like in terms of having kids, because yeah, like we said, we've been discussing it with our friends. Sometimes your family members like can get up you and be like, where's my grandchildren? When's it happening? So we asked, do you want to have kids? At Triple J The Hookup is where you can find us on Instagram, by the way. 41% of you said yes, you want to have kids. 31% said no, and 28% said still unsure, kind of deciding.
And then we asked you if you've been struggling with the decision around whether or not you want to have kids. 30% of you said yes, 24% of you said kind of, and 46% of you said not really. So this was another thing we saw in the research. Basically, the amount of kids that families want to have. So in Europe, the mean number of kids women wanted was around 2.3, but the realisticness of what they're having is actually 1.4 kids. So they're having a lot less than what they'd actually like to have. And I feel like that's something that we saw in our DMs, right, Pip? It was so many of you said, I would like to have kids, but I can't because of X, Y, Z. And so now we're going to unpack all of those reasons. There were so many. It was like 20.
Yeah.
We kind of categorized from like most popular to least, all the different reasons that you gave us around why you can't have kids or don't want to have kids or are worried about having kids.
Yep.
And so we're going to break that down.
Yeah.
The main one is that you can't afford to.
In this economy?
Yeah.
Baby, no. Like, we can't be doing it. And this is something that we just saw overwhelmingly. And by the way, this was like the strongest response to a call out that we've done in ages. Like, it literally took me like a business day to scroll to the bottom.
I know.
Like, it was crazy.
And to actually like read every single reply.
Yeah.
It was so, I was like, wow, we have really touched on something huge here.
So obviously, like, financial struggle is like a huge factor. And we found in our research that in all countries, 39% of people said financial limitations prevented them from having a child. You told us, Tash said, I'm absolutely worried about the future, barely making it by week to week. I only have $8 left until my next pay. Darren said, I would have kids if I could afford to, but even in a management position in a trade, I just can't. I wouldn't be able to support my partner and myself and my children on my wage, let alone our mortgage.
This was huge. So many of you said that you could barely pay rent, let alone raise a child.
Yeah.
And kind of what we were saying before, it's like disconnect of, well, I would love to have a kid, but in what world would I be able to survive?
Yeah.
We have seen around the world, like people's incomes aren't matching the cost of living.
Yep.
The amount that you earn doesn't actually match what you should be getting paid to in order to survive, just paying for everything.
Yeah, so the median wage at the moment in Australia is around like 67,000 per annum. And on average, raising a child in Australia from birth to young adulthood, so around like 18 to 21 years old.
Which I wouldn't say is, I feel like parents raise their kids well until their 20s now as
well. Because we're all like staying at home till
just
like 26.
Trying to save.
Yeah. So around that, it costs, they reckon, between 160,000 to 550,000 per child. That exact figure depends greatly on family income, lifestyle choices, and location. So it's pretty hard to imagine like being able to fork out $500,000. And I think these numbers, I feel like no one can really like actually pin down this number because it's changing so much and the economy is so bad. So these predictions are like, these are like good case scenarios, I feel like.
And I feel like there isn't as much job stability as well, right? Like you might be working casually or you might be working in a job or a career where there's redundancies or like technology is like rapidly increasing and becoming a huge part of maybe whatever it is that you're working in. So it's hard when you hear that to be like, oh, sometimes a child can cost $550,000. If you don't feel like you have security in what you're working in, why the fuck would you bring a child into the world?
Yeah.
Like,
it's the same with like housing as well. If you don't know if you can actually afford the Australian dream or the American dream, wherever you're listening from, most of the time when you grow up, you think, okay, my wage could support my family and a house and I can live like a normal life like my parents did. But like that's just not the case anymore. And we're going to talk a little bit about like how you felt like the housing crisis is like a huge part as to why you're like, no way could I bring another life form in. So some stats from Australia, data from like Domain, which is like a big Australian website talking about like property and everything, shows that the national vacancy rate has hit a record low of 0.7%. So that means there's nowhere to live. Like most people have either bought up housing, there's negative gearing, people are Airbnb-ing it, and then there's a million people trying to rent because they can't afford a house and the market is cooked.
Like the rent pricing has completely surged as well. I think it's gone up 25% or more since the pandemic. Perth has now overtaken Sydney as the most unaffordable city in 2024.
Were you shook by that?
I was,
as a Perth girlie?
I was like, that is wild. Perth was affordable, like growing up.
Yeah.
My parents bought their first house for $60,000. Now in Perth, rents rose 79%, while income only increased 15%.
Yeah, which I think is such a good stat to just really put it in perspective of like that the disparity between like cost of living, having to afford rent, and then your wages only increasing by 15%. I feel like the 60,000K house, I feel like everyone has a story about that with their parents.
Buying that.
I think my friend had her dad bought a place in like inner city Melbourne. I think it might have been Cremorne, and it was like, $50K. And it's just like,
while we were
looking
into all the research for this, I remember reading somewhere that in the 1950s, a father could, off of his wage, support his stay-at-home wife, his 3 kids, buy a house, maintain a mortgage, plus still have leftover cash for like leisure and hobbies.
Yeah.
In what world? Imagine.
Must be nice.
You can't even, like, two people have to work now. You
I know.
can't even do the whole stay-at-home dad or stay-at-home mom.
I know. And two people are barely affording to scrape together.
To pay their rent.
Exactly. So we got some DMs from you. Paige said, we want kids. We always have, but we went from wanting a biggish family of 3, maybe 4, to now wanting 1, maybe 2. We also have to keep putting the timeline back because we're currently in debt, renting a 2-bedroom apartment. We want to be out of debt and buy a 3-bedroom house or townhouse. But by then we'll be 32. Infertility comes up. There's so many factors for them. If you also grew up in sort of like hard circumstances and poverty and stuff like that, like so many of the reasons as to why you don't want to bring another kid in is because you're like, that was hell for me and I will never
Which
put
is what
somebody
people
through.
said.
Yeah.
Which is what people DM'd us saying.
Yeah.
Okay, another huge reason why you are not wanting to have kids or potentially not being able to is parental leave, right? A lot of the government resources just aren't enough to help a family survive. So from July 1st, Services Australia lifted the number of parental leave pay days from 110 to 120 for children born from that day. So 120 days is around 4 months roughly. This is significantly lower than the OECD, which is the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, an average of 54 weeks, placing Australia among the least generous nations in terms of length that you're offered.
Yeah. So across the world, there are countries that are doing it really well. So like Sweden and Norway are leading the way. To give you an idea, Sweden offers up to 49 weeks at 100% pay or 59 weeks at 80% pay with 15 weeks reserved for each parent. Norway also does a total of 480 days. So that's 16 months of parental leave at 80% pay with a portion specifically reserved for fathers. To be honest with you, like I've never really looked into like mat leave and pat leave because I'm not at the stage in my life where I'm thinking about it and I don't really want to go there because I don't have like a long-term partner. But it's funny because like talking to a few of my friends, like I have a friend in the UK who was literally like, oh, I'm going to stay with this job because their maternity leave is really good and it's determining so much of her life and her lifestyle. And to think about, like in Australia, you see articles and people talking all the time online about how they're just like, I can't get enough leave. I can't get childcare as well. Childcare is another reason that you told us is like a huge factor into why you don't want to bring a child into the world. We did a bit of research on that. It kind of costs between like $70 to $200 per day in childcare centres nationwide.
Yeah. And
that's just a lot of money. That is insane.
The parental leave is the minimum wage in Australia, right?
Yeah.
So it's like something like 100 and something per day. If you are having to go back to work after roughly 4 months that you get off paid, then say you're not earning that much each day in your actual job to cover like $200 per day in childcare.
Yeah.
When you weigh that up and you go, I can either earn that much at work or I can stay at home and spend time. Like there's just so much to weigh up.
Yeah. And if you also don't have like a family around you or community to help like care for your child, then that also takes a huge factor into like whether or not you can afford to do it.
Back in the day, it was kind of like the village, right? You had the village around you, you had the cousins, the family, the aunts, the uncles, the neighbours, everyone kind of chipped in and helped raise the family. You were saying that this is something that's, going into your decision making. Daisy says, we have 2 children and would have more if society supported parents who either wanted to stay at home or wanted to work. The concept of it takes a village no longer exists in our society. Alex says there is no community support for mothers. All of my mum friends feel like they're drowning. And Kate saying, I experienced depression in my 20s. The thought of postpartum depression scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, so that community factor is a massive one. Another factor like that you told us about is that you feel like there's absolutely no government support, not only for like childcare, maternity leave, but there's also no like scientific backing and medical support for people who really want to have kids but like physically might not be able to or who might struggle more than most. So Yvonne said IVF on Medicare for gay couples would mean we'd have kids tomorrow. Sadly, it's not. Kylie replied to that one in the stories saying, I agree with this IVF take. It cost me $20,000 out of pocket for 2 rounds and I was unsuccessful. So
it's so expensive.
It's so expensive. And another thing, like in terms of like the support for like gay couples as well in that sort of scenario, like there are a lot of people who are queer who want kids but can't do it. And this was a podcast that you sent to me that you were like, you should have a listen to this because I think this will be really helpful for our episode. It was called Cradle to Grave and it's done by Freakonomics and they sort of are like an economics podcast. I don't know how you came across this because I was like, I never listened to like money podcasts.
My boyfriend Darcy.
Great. I was like, this is not a D original. This is crazy.
It's not. I'm like, in what world would I be listening to? I'm like, relationships. Love, blah, blah.
But it was really fascinating to listen to from that perspective because they got like an economist, but they also got this incredible professor called Diana Laird. She's from the University of California, San Francisco in the Department of Obstetrics. Hopefully I'm saying that right, and gynecology in stem cell programs. And they were talking about how overseas, particularly in America, they don't have any science or, government backing for research to help women conceive and have children. So they were talking about how physicians and researchers can't accurately measure the number of eggs in any given woman's ovary reserves, nor do the current tests reveal anything about the quality of an egg while it's in a woman's body. And they found that with these applications that go into like their healthcare, with the words fertility, ovary and reproductive, they have the lowest rates of funding acceptance, which is much lower than words where they see protein, glaucoma, or mRNA. So it's like, this is a tale as all the time. We've been talking about it a lot. Like women's bodies just don't get research. They don't get medical backing. And if we want to fix this and help people who really want kids to then improve the economy and actually improve like the population growth, we should be funding this.
Well, it's the same with, like you said, so much of women's health issues or reproductive health issues like endo or PCOS or any sort of chronic health issue. So many of you said that you wanted to have kids but you couldn't because you had endometriosis, you had PCOS, and it was going to be hard for you to conceive. Sherry says, I can't have kids due to chronic illnesses but would like to have one if I could. And we hear time and time again that there is just such a lack of research in these spaces. There is no cure for endo.
Yeah.
There's no cure.
Yeah.
Instead, they're putting research into like attractiveness and endo.
Yeah. Also, I know I keep talking about this off air, but I keep thinking about those like crypto bros who did the sperm race, and it was like an Olympic race to see which sperm would like swim the fastest. I'm like, can we stop doing this? Can crypto bros actually put money into something really helpful, like that's actually going to help people and improve people's lives?
I can't.
It's insane.
Oh my God. Some of the other reasons why the birth rate, you think the birth rate is falling, maybe why you don't want to have kids, our values are changing. So we're no longer subscribing or we're challenging this idea of the traditional family, right? Like I said before, it was always just assumed you would get married, you would have kids, that's just what you did, you'd have the white picket fence, you would have 4. And I feel like the more that society generationally progresses, the more that we're doing things differently and questioning that.
Bo DM'd us and said, I feel like having children is almost expected of you, but why? I can't think of a good enough reason that doesn't feel self-serving in some way. Plus, as a gay man, it is ridiculously difficult to actually do that. As we mentioned before, like this is definitely something that you're battling with. And I think like queer accessibility in terms of being able to conceive and to have surrogates is such a big reason as to why you're not going down that road, because it just feels impossible. The education of women and like kind of the advancements of like women's rights has changed massively. Again, the traditional breakdown of gender roles. But yeah, in general, women are going to work so much more than ever before in society. And that has massively changed the way that we think about family and whether or not you can support a baby.
As your role as well. As a woman, it's kind of was always assumed that it was to be a mum, to be a wife. And a lot of women post World War II entering the workforce are questioning that. Jamie messaged us and said, I feel like I've got so much more to do in advancing my career. They mentioned that they're 28, that having kids seems like it will put too much on hold. Yeah. So the stats in terms of like where women are at in terms of career opportunities and education is that we are outdoing men pretty much in all aspects of that, and in many, many massive countries around the world. So including Australia, young women are now more likely to be in the workforce than men, and guys are falling behind in education and in work, and they're just kind of stagnating in terms of like their
progression in society. But the thing is about that, right? The stats are like women are working more, they are doing more, they're earning more in some cases than men. And at the same time, we're still doing the same, a little bit less housework, but in general, always doing more than men at home in terms of domestic labor.
Yeah.
So there's heaps of studies that have been done about this. But yeah, women are spending around 8.2 hours a day on paid work, housework, and caring for family. And men's involvement in housework has changed very little in their whole kind of span of things. So in 2022, they spent an average of 12.8 hours on housework per week. And that's the same that they did 20 years before that.
Yeah. So many of you messaged us and basically said, why would I become a mother when I would just, whilst working full time and having to do all of the domestic, emotional, mental labor of the house, running a household and raising a family.
Exactly. Like the juggle to you is like, it's not worth it. I already have so much on my plate.
Yeah.
This also, we found out that women spend 8.8 hours caring for their own children compared to 4.5 hours of men. So again, you're thinking, why would I bring on that responsibility if my partner can't even meet me?
And research shows that the gender pay gap is the largest for mothers. So what happens is when you have kids, you probably have to take a step away from your career. Then you don't get the career progression that your potentially male, say you're in a hetero relationship, partner. One partner, no matter what the dynamic is always going to miss out career advancement and opportunities in the workforce by stepping back to raise the kids, at least in the beginning. And I think that a lot of people are weighing that up and going like, well, I'm thriving in my career, or I don't feel like I've made the progress in my career that I wanted to. So why would I have kids when there's still so much that I want to achieve?
Yeah, exactly. Something that we've spoken about quite a lot on the Hookup as well is the dating recession. So we did a really massive episode about the political gender divide that's going on in terms of women and men and how they are becoming further and further apart in terms of values, life goals, etc.
Politically aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah. Men are moving towards the right. Research shows that men are moving more towards the right, being more conservative.
Especially young men.
And young women are moving more towards the left, becoming more progressive and more feminist.
In the episode, we did ask you, like, you know, would you not date someone based on their political algorithm or views? 86% of you said yes. So again, like, if you're not finding someone to like have a child with, then you're not going to do that because your political values don't align.
Yeah. So Mim DM'd us and said, definitely gender inequality, only with the right person where parenting and housework is a 50-50 split. I'd rather have kids alone or not at all than with a useless man-child. It's just more work. A lot of you saying that it was harder to find a partner that you want to settle down with. Sam saying, I genuinely would love a child. I just turned 35, but I can't find a decent guy. And Ruby said, yes, I want to have a kid, but to find a good partner to have one with. I've watched single mums deal with shit men as fathers and I don't want the same experience. Otherwise, I'm happy with no kids.
Yeah. So like obviously go and have a listen to those episodes because we really deep dive into it. So we probably don't need to spend that much time on it. But I did want to show a video. I did see this and it did get sent around to our group chats.
Yeah.
So D's across this.
Yeah.
But this video of this woman doing a bit of a hot take on how a top tier man is just an average woman kind of sums up how a lot of you might be feeling in terms of like dating, finding a partner and struggling to find someone who's actually going to add value to your life.
A top tier man is just an average woman.
Real, why?
A top tier man, what we think is like, oh, he can provide like emotional support. He is responsive, communicative. When an average man does this, we tend to like glorify and think like, oh, he's such a great guy because he does all of this. But like at the end of the day, your female friend can already do this. So what can this man provide for you that your friends cannot?
The bar is so low for dating. In the past like 40 years, we went from guys writing love letters to women courting men and doing anything to be in a relationship.
There's like no courting. Women have to do a lot. You see this in all European paintings where like men would like build literal courts, buildings and statues for like the women that they are yearning for.
A big part is the accessibility of women to men. Like porn, OnlyFans, and hookup culture. Because a lot of guys feel like they have those needs met, a lot of them feel like they don't need to work for a relationship.
And I also think that men probably feel a little bit more entitlement. They think that they can pull any girl. It's okay to have confidence, but if you think that you're really, really hot I think that really changes your attitude and your interactions with women or with anyone. And I've seen like way too many like hot and capable, intelligent women with men who look like rats.
So that's taken from the bench. And obviously, like, it's not necessarily directly talking about like having children with men, but like it's just kind of a good summary of like where a lot of you feel
the temperature check of how some women are feeling.
Exactly.
But this is the thing about algorithms, and we've explored it a bit on the hookup, is that a lot of people are getting fed this kind of content, right? But then a lot of women are, but a lot of guys are getting fed similar content about being a top tier guy and trying to find a top tier woman. And so what we're seeing is that there's really polarizing views happening in the gendered space that's kind of forcing this disconnect, and a lot more people are choosing to be single over dating. They just can't see eye to eye anymore, you know?
Yeah.
A really big reason though was the environmental concern. A lot of you were really worried about overpopulation and you didn't want to contribute to that. You were worried about climate change, things like lower carbon emissions, reduced pressure on natural resources, less habitat destruction, lower waste production. Sparky DM'd us saying humans create so much waste, the earth has already suffered enough. And Kim said, I'm already so stressed about climate instability. More people is not what we need on this planet.
A lot of you said that you were worried about the overpopulation. Rose saying, I don't want to contribute more to the population. I think there's so many children out there that deserve good homes that people could consider adoption because genetics aren't everything, nor do they make you a family. The world is falling apart and it doesn't need more people. Carly saying, why does it matter? We're overpopulated worldwide and there are kids who need homes.
Yeah, so many of you, it was really huge. A lot of you were just like, it's actually just fucking selfish.
Yeah.
Like wanting to have a kid or giving birth and raising a family was selfish. I don't think we need to go into the depth of like what's happening climate change-wise. Like I think we're pretty across it all. Temperatures rising, melting ice caps, biodiversity loss, fires, floods. Like we're seeing it in real time. The likelihood of crossing critical temperature thresholds is rising steeply, if not is already happening. But we investigated this, right? Because it was such a huge, huge response from you of saying like, the world is overpopulated. We're actually doing a good thing here.
Because everyone was saying it's like, well, if we have less people, then we're using less resources. Maybe we're damaging the environment less. It could be better overall. And we were like, hold on, let's have a look at this.
I found a video from Kurt Kazat, which is kind of like an explainer, deep dive media company on YouTube. And so they made this video called Why Humans Are Vanishing. And really interestingly, they actually found that not like the birth rate falling and not having kids doesn't actually help the environment and climate change.
If there are fewer people, won't life get cheaper and better and there'll be more resources to go around? Well, no. Population decline doesn't lead to prosperity. It's people's ideas and work that create our prosperity, not the mere availability of resources. Another danger for aging societies is that elected governments could decide to mostly represent the interests and fears of their elderly populations, potentially leading to short-term thinking and a preference for conserving wealth over innovation. That's not a society that can handle issues like climate change, which need massive investment and fresh ideas, something the world is already having a hard time with. Many people think that having fewer humans on Earth is actually a good thing because our societies are too unsustainable, we're using up too many resources, and because of climate change. The problem is that even if you want fewer humans, this process is very likely too slow to have a positive impact on the environment. The world population is going to grow for at least 60 more years before it may shrink again. By then, we have to solve climate change. Likewise, any other upsides a lower population might have will most likely not materialize themselves this century.
Yeah, isn't
How
that
interesting
fascinating?
is that? Because I think, everyone is right. We are overpopulated and it is impacting the environment and contributing to a mass amount of resources being used.
And waste. Human waste.
And it's right. But I found that so interesting was that we are going to continue being overpopulated over the next 60 years. The population is going to increase. But then that's where we're going to start seeing the decline and the issues post 60 years of that overpopulation.
Yeah, and I think what was cool about that is considering that these new generations, we need fresh ideas. We need young people who are giving a fuck and coming up with this stuff. And I never thought about it like that. Something else that video said was like talking about how, you know, the governments who are older might only consider like elderly people concerns. I was like, that's like happening now. Like,
seriously,
hello, USA, where like every president is like geriatric and all they care about is like staying in power.
Quick results.
Yeah, quick results, staying in power, making sure that they, like stay in office. And that's like, oh, it's happening now.
There's like there's a real lack of concern for future generations.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, a lot of this stuff is just theorizing. Like when we talk about future predictions and what can happen, it's all theorizing. But yeah, like I said, Pip and I did so much research into this. It's all in the show notes.
And sometimes they can be wrong. Like in the past, they've been wrong. Like in that cradle.
In China?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was going to say in China and like one child policy?
Yeah, they thought that China was going to be like extremely overpopulated, so they brought in the one child policy and it completely failed, and it turned out that that wasn't actually a concern that.
And the actual damage to the like society of that was like so bad. But also in that Cradle to Grave podcast, they were talking about in that first episode about a guy who had predicted all this crazy stuff for the world and it was like completely wrong. So theorizing, it's important, but also I'd hope we have better resources than in the 60s and like figuring out like the flow of population.
How to do. So many of you also were worried about the future. You didn't want to raise kids or bring more kids into the world with things like AI, tech, the politics that are happening globally. Kim said, I have 2 kids and no regrets having them, but the worry about the world for me is a daily stressor. Sim, I have multiple chronic illnesses and I don't want to pass them on to a child. And Bo saying, if I'm not 100% happy and healthy, why would I want to pass on my genes to bring a child into what is currently a really messy world politically?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like AI and technology. I don't know about you, but like I feel like maybe once a month I think about like, man, it must be hard having a child right now when porn is accessible. And I think about it all the time and be like, how do parents
their first
deal?
relationship might be with AI?
Yes. Like just having access to the internet and what is going on with like internet stuff.
Well, just how
like,
bad
wow.
short form videos and algorithms are for your brain.
Yeah.
Imagine a developing brain and that's what they're consuming constantly. Like that cannot be good for you.
Another thing we also heard from you in terms of why you might be choosing not to have kids is your lifestyle. You're loving it. You're loving it sick. And we don't blame ya. Dan says, my friends with kids describe their perfect day as basically my normal life. What I'm imagining there is like their parents being like, wow, wouldn't it be nice to like wake up whenever I want, go get a coffee, do grocery shopping by myself, like, you know, stuff like that. That's like simple stuff.
Sit on the toilet in peace.
Literally. Bree said, I fear a kid will take any joy I have left. Parenting isn't what people make it out to be and I love my body as is. Cassie saying, my life is way too fun to have kids. I literally do whatever I want, whenever I want. Plus, I miss out on nothing. Also, they seem noisy and expensive. Normalize living for what you want to do, not what society tells you to do. That is a massive change of like heart. Again, I know we mentioned it, but like the traditional values, so different now.
So different. Ellie's saying parenting looks and is extremely difficult for what looks like slim gains. I want to enjoy my life. And I'm also just proudly selfish and want to live my life for me and not have it revolve around others and waste my Saturday at kids' sports games pretending to be friends with the other kids' parents.
It's so negative. I know we said we're not meant to have an opinion on it, but I'm like, whoa.
It really was. Like the DMs were.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I'm like, who's to say that's right or wrong? You know, who was anyone to judge if someone decides like that's not for them?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Live your life.
I think as well, because the world seems so cooked right now and the idea of having a kid and taking away your lifestyle, it's like we're really having a YOLO moment where people are realizing this is your one life, live it, do not do what society tells you, go for gold and make sure that you are happy and live well.
It's also a very individualistic society.
Exactly.
We are kind of being encouraged now to think more about ourselves and like, you know, the whole therapy to be like put boundaries in place and save our peace.
You don't know anyone anything.
Yeah, like just looking like mentally looking after ourselves, looking after our mental health, prioritizing our peace. I feel like that's become like a real concern for young people.
Yes, 100%.
And tell me, as if a kid's not going to disrupt that peace.
You will have no inner peace at that point. I think this is probably a good point for us to figure out what will actually happen though if we have an aging population, aka if we aren't having kids, we grow older, who's there to look after us?
Yeah, so many of you messaged us and said, who the fuck cares?
Literally. You're like, why is this a problem?
Why is this a problem?
You're like,
Why
I
does it
see
matter?
no issue with this.
Isn't this a great thing? The world is so overpopulated.
I'm seeing like TikToks of girls who are talking about like the declining birth rates in America.
And they're being like, you're
and
welcome.
they're like, well done, ladies.
We did
Keep
it.
going. And I'm like, whoa.
They're
okay.
literally like, you're so welcome.
Yeah, they're
Like,
so happy about it.
yeah, look, we had the same kind of reaction. So when we actually looked into the research ourselves, it was a bit of a 180 switch. It was like, oh God, like this is actually a really, really huge problem.
Yeah, let's just say the mood shift in
We were like,
D&I's
oh.
week, we were like, wait. Why is no one talking about this? Because this seems detrimental to society.
Yeah. Highly, highly recommend watching that Kirk Kazat video I was telling you about why humans are vanishing, because they do a really great explanation.
Shout out, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan in our DM sent us a link to the Kirk Kazat video about South Korea in particular. It was really interesting.
Yes.
But this is the thing. So it's not, so like we were saying, the world is overpopulated, right? And it is continuously going to be overpopulated over the next 60 years. But the issue isn't about population. It's about the composition of the majority of people making up that population being elderly. So, for example, in that video that I just mentioned, the South Korea one, they spoke about the fact that young and middle-aged people do most of the work, right? So in a population, you want majority of that population to be young and middle-aged. In any economic system, working-age people create a society's wealth. So in retirement, you stop contributing as much to the economy, but the majority of the healthcare costs are generated by seniors. So they estimated that by 75 years' time, the median age in Korea will be 59 years old.
Yeah.
So estimates vary that for a pension system to work, the minimum of society needs is between 2 to 3 workers per retiree, paying for them with their taxes. But even if we assume that all South Koreans over 15 will be working in 2060, the country will have less than 1 worker per senior.
So let that sink in. You need 2 to 3 people in South Korea in specific.
With an old person on your back.
As if a 59-year-old's there and you need 2 to 3 people to contribute their taxes, their labor, whatever they're doing in society to uphold society. You need that to support one person. But by 2060, they will have less than that per senior person. And the scary thing about the South Korea video is like often these curse stats videos, they end it and they're like, but there is hope. The end of this one, they were like, no, this is happening. And it's like there's no way to reverse it.
And
like
that's
it's basically
assuming-
impossible.
And that's assuming that the birth rate keeps declining at the same pace that it's declining, which is quite rapid. It could just decline even drastically and even faster.
Yes.
So the way that I kind of summarize is like, I do not have an economic brain, but I was like, so basically we won't have any workers to pay tax, to pay for healthcare, to support the old, I was about to say the C word, to support the seniors.
The seniors of society.
So that means that like young people will end up having to do like extreme hours, be overworked, or there'll just be a whole population in poverty.
Yeah. And don't forget, before we were saying we're relying on these young people to come up with innovation ideas to help with the world through what it's going through right now, like climate change. And these people are already going to be overworked. If the economy doesn't get any better, they might be underpaid, under a lot of stress. And like this is a guaranteed thing for South Korea. Go watch that video. But, you know, we're edging into that too. Like as a developed country, a lot of developed countries around the world are facing the same problems, but not as severely as them. So I feel like there's probably a chance that we could maybe turn it back, but I'm also not an expert on this.
Yeah.
But in Australia, again, like the bottom line is that if you don't have enough people in the workforce, then there's not enough taxes. And that's the thing that I was really
Won't have enough
shocked.
government resources.
I didn't know this, that governments rely mostly on individual taxes to pay for things like healthcare, roads, infrastructure, all of that. So it's like you and me. They're relying on us.
Oh yeah, doll.
And I'm like,
Where do you think 40% of our paycheck goes?
I know, but it just kind of hit me more when I heard it from this
Yeah.
YouTube video.
Yeah.
And it makes me go like, why aren't we taking from like other corporations and like, why is it all on the
Yeah.
individual? But when you put that in perspective of an aging population, if there's not enough people in the workforce and not enough people
budget-
in general.
Basically, the government's budget will be drastically reduced,
They
which
have no
means
money.
that they will have to do more with
With
less
less.
government money.
Yes. And this is what like economists and people in Australia are predicting for us too. Obviously not as severe as South Korea, but it's like, like we should be probably talking about this now because a huge number of people and all those reasons why that we listed, you are not keen on having kids, and a lot of them are fair, but it's like
I just don't see it. I definitely don't see it improving. And this is the thing, we don't have time to get into it, but there are just so many ways that like governments are trying to create incentives. Like Trump's talking about like the baby bonus, and there's like all these. It's like I don't think people are actually, from looking into this, I don't think people are coming up with greater incentives. But a lot of these Kurt Kazat videos and a lot of the research we have in our show notes do have ways that this can be reversed and ways that this can help like the lowering birth rates. But yeah, we just don't have time to get into it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
We hope that you got a lot out of this episode. I feel like for us in particular, we now have this new thing to stress about. Which is fun.
I feel like it's just completely made me spiral. Like this has
this whole week I've been like so down.
I was still already having these thoughts and conversations with my friends around having kids, and now they're like exacerbated.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact we haven't even talked about the fact that like if you have kids now, with your later in life, you will actually be looking after your parents who are aging and probably getting ill, as well as raising a family.
Yeah,
so you have to be looking after like.
Yeah. There's a term for it. It's like the sandwich generation, where it's like you are pulled in both directions at that point. Basically what we're trying to say is
go on that cruise in the Mediterranean.
Go live your life. But also low-key have a kid.
No,
I don't know. No, take that up. I don't know. I think like it's hard to end this podcast because we don't really want to end it all doomy and gloomy, but it kind of is. I know, but it kind of is, and we don't really have an answer for you. But look, go have a look at the show notes if this is something that you're interested in. Definitely go check out those YouTube videos. They're really easy to understand. And yeah, send this around to your friends if you're interested. And if you ever want us to cover something specific for a research topic like this that you're like, I don't understand why an aging population is bad, and like why should I have a child, or like whatever it is.
Yeah.
We would love to investigate it for you. We do it roughly once a month, so there's always room for more topics to come through.
I know. We love doing it.
Yeah, it
makes
fun.
us feel like real journalists.
We feel so smart.
I know.
I
was like,
smart.
wow, look at me doing economics. And thank you to all of you as well who DM'd us and sent some really incredible perspectives that I hadn't even thought about that I've now added to my spiraling brain. So thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll meet you in the DMs.
Bye.
Bye.